Leader of the People's National Congress Reform and the Parliamentary Opposition, Mr. Ganesh Maipal, Member of Parliament, Shadow Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, Executive Member of the PNCR, and Mr. Elson Lowe, Treasurer of the PNCR and Economist. Today's press statement will be read in two parts, and we will begin with the Leader of the Opposition.
PPP finally caves in to some of the opposition demands, but its incompetence and corrupt nature will hinder proper implementation. The opposition welcomes the return of free education to the University of Guyana. It must be recalled that it was Forbes Burnham PNC that, without oil money, instituted free education at the University of Guyana. Unfortunately, it was removed by the PPP regime in 1994, resulting in many who did not have the money being deprived of a university education. While we welcome the return of free education to the university, we are concerned that the PPP has not embraced our complete proposal to write off all student debts that accrued during the period when the PPP reintroduced the payment of tuition fees. We promise all Guyanese that the next PNCRA-PNU government will write off all student loans. The PPP has finally caved into the pressure the opposition has been putting on the government by demanding cash transfer to the people of Guyana. Unfortunately, it is too little, too late. And while we urge Guyanese to accept it, since it is their money, it will not positively impact the high cost of living. We, however, submit that this one-off and piecemeal approach, which will not reduce the cost of living and take people out of poverty, is not the best. There is need for a more comprehensive approach. In an obvious act of political desperation, President Ali unveiled yesterday a few social transfer measures, foremost among which is the one-off payment of $200,000 per household. Had he been gracious enough, he would have credited the opposition for calling on this government to make such a transfer since 2022. The only difference being that our call was for 300,000 Guyana dollars. At our press conference on 1st November, for example, we stated, and I quote, "In the short term, however, as the cost of living continues to spiral upward, and as Guyanese families continue to struggle to make ends meet, we call on the government to ensure our people get more from the windfall of oil revenues. This windfall now amounts to over US $300 million. We call for this windfall to be fairly and justly distributed so that all households can benefit. For ease of reference, this amounts to Guyana 300,000 per household," unquote. We repeated this call in our press conference statement 4 times, the last time being on the 19th of July, 2024, when we called for the immediate distribution of the unexpected $300 million windfall in oil revenue earned in 2022 due to the Ukraine war. Had a coalition been in government in 2022, Guyanese would have received $300,000 per household in addition to monthly benefits. The president's announcements must be placed in the proper context. His very government fought tooth and nail a few months ago to resist the legitimate demands of teachers. Even more, he's on record twice this year stating that teachers, public servants, nurses, and other government employees must wait for better pay until 2030. What has occasioned the change of mind? Pressure from the opposition. On his part, VP Jagdeo repeated yesterday that pensioners can expect only $41,000 per month in the 2025 budget. less than $200 per day increase. Guyanese must never lose sight of the fact that all decisions of the PPP are politically calculated for domination, manipulation, and control, and are not guided by any moral principle or sense of duty to the people. The long-suffering Guyanese people deserve much more than what is offered by the government yesterday. However, they must see the cash transfer as their entitlement and not as money that belongs to the PPP. These transfers and much more could have been allocated to the people of Guyana years ago. Given that Budget 2024 included no such provision, these payouts must have been triggered by a panic at Freedom House that it is losing the support of more and more Guyanese daily. Nonetheless, the payouts are inadequate and will not divert from the meanness, corruption, and cronyism of the PPP regime. It is important to state here that the government must ensure that a cash transfer is done properly and fairly. Guyanese will recall that the 25,000 COVID-19 transfer were filled with discrimination and lack of accountability. Recall that many Guyanese still have their pink slip and have been unable to collect their cash grant. It is reported that PPP activists in Rose Hall demanded as much as $30,000 to place people's names on yesterday's cash grant payout under quarantine. It is important that what constitutes a household be properly defined so that it is not at the whims and fancies of PPP activists. In addition, the cash grant must not be distributed by PPP activists, but by non-partisan government workers. These transfers must not again be used to enrich PPP members, their families, and favorites. Let us outline how we will approach the policy of social transfers as the next government. 1. Our approach will emphasize monthly or otherwise scheduled payments over the PPP one-off and sporadic style of payment. By making our payments on a regular basis, citizens will benefit from the predictability of this income and can therefore plan their investment, savings, and expenditure decisions. Regular payments can also be used as collateral for bank loans. In the PPP model, this cannot happen. 2, our payments will be based on a calculation of a livable income for households of different sizes, compositions, regions, and other circumstances. We will ensure all households receive this livable income through wages, cash transfer, subsidies, tax allowances, business profits, and other sources of income. Initial calculation put this income around $300,000 per month on average for a family of 4. When in government, we will be able to more accurately calculate this figure and adjust it accordingly for inflation. Bottom line for us is no Guyanese household must live in poverty or economic insecurity. 3, some of our other measures include 1, an income tax threshold of $400,000 per month compared to the PPP's promised $100,000 per month by the end of 2024-25. A monthly child care allowance of over $10,000 for all children up to 16 years old, regardless of whether their parents are formally employed or not. Children up to 5 years old will get an additional sum of $2,500 monthly as a nutrition supplement. 3, to ensure households have more disposable income, we will partly or fully subsidize rent, mortgage, travel, water, electricity, cooking gas, with greater targeting of lower income families. We will not only make UG free, but pay all non-working tertiary level students a stipend of $50,000 per month. We will also invest heavily in small business as a means of community development, self-employment, and women and youth empowerment. And four, pay, pay out of windfall revenues in an equitable manner. The PPP's approach to cash transfer is clearly not well thought out and comes over as an election gimmick. Number four, unlike the PPP, which sees social transfer as pure consumption, eating out the budget, as Barrett Jagdew often describes it, we in the opposition see such expenditures as economic investments. As such, investments promote human resources development and catalyze a demand-driven economy. With proper economic planning, putting more money in the hands of citizens can expand the economy by boosting the impact of citizens as consumers, savers, entrepreneurs, and investors. Even more, we see such as investments as our moral obligation as a government to all citizens to uplift their quality of life and guarantee their social and economic human rights. As such, these expenditures will be an integral part of our people-centered development strategy. Guyanese, therefore, will be treated with respect in contrast to the PPP's arrogance and desire to manipulate, dominate, and control the people of Guyana. Five, we believe all Guyanese should enjoy the fruits of their national endowment, and therefore we will invest heavily in lifting the quality of life beyond only money income. We will therefore invest heavily in health and well-being, education, training, sport, leisure, and recreation, safe and pleasant communities, easy access to justice, hinterland development, food security, and social protection. Six, financing these current expenditures would require prudent financial management. We will be depend on a redistribution of spending within the national budget. B, savings from reducing financial mismanagement and corruption. C, increased oil revenues from higher profit oil. D, higher interest from the Natural Resource Fund, especially as its investment arms kicks in. And E, increased income from a larger non-oil economy. Guyana deserves more. As the next government, we will deliver more.
Thank you. Mr. Alton.
Most of the concerns and criticisms of the PNCR's 20-point policy proposal are answered within the document itself. Since the release 2 Wednesdays ago, September 25th, of our 20-point statement of policies and principles on the local oil and gas sector, we have noticed several comments. We welcome these comments, as the statement is also intended to generate feedback that we will use for improvements. The most comprehensive review we have noticed was done by Christopher Rabb, published in 2 parts in the Starbuck News. While he highlights several positive aspects of the statement, he identifies several what he calls quote-unquote limitations and concerns. Before addressing these, let us for the umpteenth time rebuff the accusation that the PNCR and the opposition have been silent or ambivalent on the oil and gas sector over the last 4 years. It is paradoxical that the more one speaks about the matter, the more one is accused of silence. Any review of our press statements and conferences will show that we have spoken abundantly on oil and gas. Even the intermittent news coverage of our positions, if we take Kaishar News, Starbuck News, and Village Voice alone, will still prove that we have been very talkative on the issue. I myself have been featured very regularly in the newspapers. The PNCR and its leader have spoken about and advocated for a range of issues, such as getting more benefits from the 2016 PSA, ensuring full liability coverage for oil spills, establishing the Petroleum Commission, instituting more stringent and regular audits, giving muscle and backbone to the EPA, calling for full transparency, in particular for the gas energy project, and fully operationalizing the NRF Act. Turning to Mr. Ram's comments directly, we are puzzled by his conclusion that the statement, quote unquote, represents at best a promise to review rather than act. Most of the 20 points describe intended actions. For example, point number one states we will institute an expert advisory team. Point number two states we will establish a petroleum commission. Point number three speaks about instituting an independent inspector general's office. Point number four states that we will immediately reinstate the coalition government's requirements for full liability coverage. Point seven states we will build capacity in the education sector as a priority. In point 10, we clearly state that we will engage the Stabroek Bloc partners to maximize the benefits of the oil resources to the people of Guyana while ensuring a fair share of profit for Stabroek Bloc partners. Point 11 speaks about conducting feasibility studies. In point 15, we pledge to give the public full access to all information, and so on. All of these are action-oriented. The inaccurate comment that the 20-point statement emphasizes review over action is also unfair in two other regards. Number one, for such a complex industry, with Guyana's current and future economic, environmental, and social life at stake, it would be reckless for any government to proceed without reviews or the assistance of experts. Logically, concrete actions will have to await the recommendations of those reviews. And two, the current PUP government has been repeatedly and justifiably criticized for managing the oil and gas sector by whims, impulses, half-baked ideas, and guesswork. How then could the PNCR also be criticized for proposing a more prudent and knowledge-based approach? Mr. Ram expresses disappointment and shock that the PNCR proposal fails to address, as he sees it, glaring deficiencies and omissions, such as payment of company taxes by government, royalties, ring fencing, stability clause, renegotiation, timeline, and implementation, and a few other topics. But point number 10 in the PNCR statement covers all of Mr. Ram's concerns. For the benefit of all Guyanese, let us quote what point number 10 states. Considering the vastly changed conditions since the signing of the 2016 Stabroek Bloc Production Sharing Agreement, and consistent with Article 32.1 of the PSA, we will complete a top-to-bottom review of the PSA and then engage the Stabroek Bloc partners to maximize the benefits of the oil resources to the people of Guyana, while ensuring a fair share of profit for Stabroek Bloc partners. The review will include, but not be limited to, ring-fencing of projects, oil tax regime, environmental responsibilities, decommissioning, transparency, timely reporting of information, regulatory oversight, and real-time monitoring, auditing, local content, shared management, and decision-making and operations in the oil and gas sector. A wide range of areas were mentioned. What else could engage the Stabroek Bloc partners mean? For some reason, some in Guyana do not appreciate that the term renegotiation has acquired unhelpful connotations, while they continue to reject the fact that the term has appropriate synonyms. It seems that without using the R word, one could not mean the same thing just as seriously. But moreover, the PNCR has adopted the common sense position of waiting on the advice of its advisory team, as described in point number 1, before pronouncing on these matters that are pregnant with implications. While being morally outraged and mind-boggled, quote, to use Ram's word, may be a useful emotional state to detect shortcomings and failures, finding solutions requires a more studied and data-based approach. Again, it is contradictory for the coalition government to be criticized for signing the 2016 PSA without adequate expert advice, and then to turn around when expert advice is being sought and criticize the approach of seeking such expert advice. In many cases, therefore, actions must await reviews and studies. In the same vein, the criticism that the policy statement lacks timelines is out of place. As point number 1 indicates, within 90 days of taking office, the PNCR APNU administration will constitute a distinguished advisory team of professionals. The Gantt chart for the establishment and operation of this team would determine the timelines for the implementation of most of the other proposals. The PNCR's 20-point proposal is not meant to contain all the final and definitive decisions and positions to the challenges facing the oil and gas sector. We understand that some desire to see ultimatums. We understand that some desire to see ultimatums right away. Instead, it is meant to provide a roadmap and to develop a new decision-making culture to arrive at definitive positions. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the floor for questions on the first statement, posed by the raise of hand, and please show me your house as you take your question.
Mr. Norton, that is Shabbat Amaralis. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Norton, do you have a price tag? Not a price tag. Do you have like an overall global number? Does it include the error relief measures and possibly for? And secondly, what do you make of Mr. Sandy, the Deputy Vice Chairman of Region 4, actually coming out in support of the President's initiative of the $200,000 per month, etc., and calling it?
Dennis, we didn't catch the last thing you said.
Mr.
I
Shabbat,
don't hear you.
you broke up just now. We didn't hear the last thing you asked.
Yes, the first question is how much it can cost the Treasury of your proposed tax measures, etc., per annum. And secondly, what do you make of the the Vice Chairman for Region 4, Mr. Sandy, praising the $200,000 cash went out by the President, now first calling his measures visionary?
Now, let me start with Mr. Sandy. He doesn't speak for the PNC. He's not a member of the executive. And as a citizen, I think he's free to arrive at what conclusion he wants to arrive at. As it relates to the cost, we see $240 billion as doing all that we want, and taxes about $60 billion, based on advice from the people who are dealing with our economic data.
And all of this being borne by all revenues?
Well, we didn't say it is going to be pushed by oil revenue. If you listen to the statement, we said also we're going to cut rates, we're going to prudently manage. We believe that if we accept the view that 40% of the public works budget goes to waste and corruption, then you can see that we can reduce the present budgetary allocations. We said we will redistribute it so that it is not solely dependent on oil revenues, though oil revenues will play a greater part. We also talk about increasing the non-oil economy as a contributor. So it's a more comprehensive approach than the approach that says everything will come from oil. We see economic development in a rounded fashion, that we have to develop all sectors in the society. We see the need to put the non-oil sector on a formidable footing so that whenever oil is in trouble, we are not totally in trouble. And so our approach is not an approach that relies solely on oil and gas, though oil and gas will play a role in the allocation of resources. Remember as well that we did say that we will do more investment from the Natural Resource Fund. We pointed out that the investment committee will come into play, and even when that comes into play, there's a high probability that we will get more because it will be properly invested. So oil will play a part, but it isn't the only one.
And your response to Mr. Woodgadge's position that basically they will not entertain the invocation of the article of the PSA that deals with things like renegotiation. What's your position on that, given what he said only a few days ago, a couple of days ago?
What, who said? What? I didn't hear what you said. He said. What?
Mr. Woodcliff, president of ExxonMobil, effectively saying that they will not be agreeing to the implication of the article in the PSC that allows for renegotiation and other things.
We have the tendency to cross the bridge when we meet the bridge. But I want persons to, a lot of times when I talk about Article 32.1, people say they don't know what it is. Let me read it and then we'll think it. It says, except as may be expressly provided herein, the government shall not amend, modify, rescind, terminate, declare invalid or unenforceable, require renegotiation of, compel replacement or substitution, or otherwise seek to avoid, alter, or limit this agreement without the prior written consent of the contractor. Now, clearly, this article opens the door for us to engage the contractor. When we arrive at that stage where we engage the contractor, we have people who are skilled in negotiations. In these things, you have to know when the condition is propitious to you engaging. And we believe at the time, regardless of what is said now, there will be scope for re-engage, to engage the producer, the contractor, and make changes. There is evidence that changes were made already. So there is precedent. I accept that Mr. Rutledge has to take a position in keeping with his government, it's his company's mandate. Our task is to represent the people of Ghana. We will do that. And when we come to that bridge, we will cross it, and we believe we will cross it successfully.
Mr. Norton, going back to Mr. Sandy, you said he has the right as a private citizen and he do what he wants, but at the end of the day, he's not there as a member of your party, and he's a senior member of the Region 4 Council. Doesn't this bother you as the leader of the party that someone as senior as him in the scheme of local politics is coming out and having a different position altogether, where he's praising the initiative while you're opposing it?
Well, I don't know that you can say we have opposed any initiative. We have pointed out things that we welcome, and we have identified its pitfalls, and we do not believe that it will improve the lives of the people. So our task is to critique it, which we did. If Sandy makes pronouncements that are not based on the data we are accessing, so be it. Now, Sandy is a vice chairman, and he made his pronouncement. Those pronouncements are not pronouncements on behalf of the People's National Congress reform. Those have got to be in his personal capacity. You know, unfortunately in this world, the PPP probably, in their approach to domination and control, only one person could talk. And when that one person permit the president to talk, then he can talk. In some regard, we are a little more democratic than that. There will always be situations where persons among us have a different view. But our views are discussed at the level of our party. And having discussed them, we take policy positions. And those are the positions that would have guided our position. Take, for instance, the principles on oil and gas. I don't know that Sandy agrees with them. And as an individual, he has a right to or not to. But our party would have agreed, and therefore it's our policy position. I assume if you stretch it the way you want to stretch it, if Sandy kills somebody tomorrow, then the PNC is responsible. I don't understand the logic, and I disagree with your conclusion.
In addition,
I do not apply that as a part of the logic, Mr. Norton. Final question, Mr. Norton, would be, are you worried that you might be losing Mr. Sandy to the PP?
In politics, the PPP lost people to the PNC. In politics, the PNC lost people to the PPP. In politics, people lost their way out of politics. I am not worried about an individual. What matters is our party. Our party has been in the forefront of clearly defining policies and programs. Our party has been in the forefront of putting the pressure to the People's Progressive Party to make the changes, and we believe some of these that have occurred are changes that as a result of opposition pressure. Because 3 months ago, Jack, they were saying it was impossible. Irfan Ali was saying it was impossible. It will fuel inflation. I see now they have Bagwandin saying it would fuel inflation. Our criticism of it is that it is not comprehensive. It is piecemeal. And to deal with the high cost of living and poverty, we need to deal with all aspects. And it is in that sense, our approach, our people-centered development approach, is a much better approach because it looks at every sector, every institution, and is guided by the principle that resources should go to the people of Ghana to improve the quality of life. Those things exist wherever Sandy goes or come.
And Dennis, we take issue with the idea that it is just the president's policy or president's idea. We have been championing this 60 billion grant to households for years. We have spoken at length in this very press conference. We've mentioned many of the quotes from previous press conferences. This is because we observed that there was a windfall, an unexpected 60 billion that was earned due to high prices in the war in Ukraine, and that we also saw that food prices went up, as you saw disruptions in grain shipments, as you saw the price of oil spike, which drove up the cost of a lot of other goods. So the PNP has been sitting on this money all along. What is clearer and clearer to the Guyanese people is that the ideas in terms of how to move this country forward are coming from our party, and that the PNP scrambles at ones that are popular and then puts them out. What you're also seeing is because they're just copying what they hear, they're not producing the comprehensive plans that we are producing. And so our cost of living plans have several measures in place or several ideas that we believe should be implemented that will have an impact on the cost of living. They put out one thing, which is the provision of this cash grant, while ignoring all of the many other critical elements of this. And so we want to make it clear to the Guyanese people that it is the PNCR, it is the opposition that knows how to run this country and the direction that this country must be going. The PNP is scrambling here and there to snatch an idea, one or the other, because they don't really know what to do. That is clear. And as the leader pointed out, just a few months ago, they were saying, no cash grant. All of a sudden, they believe that the opposition's position is the correct position. That's because they don't have a clue, and they are just piggybacking off of what we are saying.
And they didn't even have the graciousness to mention Clive Thomas' name. I remember Barra Jagdeo ranting and raving like if it is an idea that is impossible. And now they're embracing it. We are glad they embrace it. They have said it is inadequate. But we know it would have taken a lot out of them to do it, because you know what this will do? Reduce the corruption money. And the whole focus of them is to make money based on corruption. So that we have gotten them to give this little bit in itself is a step in the right direction, because they now recognize that people are gravitating towards our people-centered development strategy, and that their strategy of putting money in the hands of themselves, their families, friends, and favorites, that strategy is failing. And so they have now come around to accept our position, though they are still trying their best to hold on to the resources so that they can put them into corrupt activities.
Thank you. Mr. Adam Harris.
Good morning, all. Both you and Mr. Lowe did talk about the government saying it was unable to increase because it was going to fuel inflation. What has changed to cause this radical turnaround to put that amount of money in the economy? And secondly, it's going to every household. Is there a measure of the households in Guyana? Can you say, sir, if you can verify the number of households in Guyana that would be able to receive this money?
I don't think even the government could, because they didn't even release the data from the census. This government is a government of guesswork. They haven't released the data from the census. And if you listen to Barra Jack Deo yesterday, you will hear him trying to work out what constitutes a household. And there are a plethora of things that have got to be addressed. We said in our statement, we will look at all of those variables. And then we cannot separate now from what happened before. The PPP in COVID-19 started by saying household, and then they turned to saying you got to show that you own the house. And they use that to discriminate against people. Now we anticipate, because they do not have the data, they don't believe in a data-driven approach, we will end up in the same problems again. Now, what has occasioned the change? We said it in the document. Their fading popularity. The fact that even in their own support base, people are saying this isn't working. They are too corrupt. We are not benefiting from the resources of oil and gas. And as I don't know if you know, they had a census done recently, and they aren't doing too good. They're doing poorly. And so I believe that their own work in terms of a census, a poll, sorry, not census, their own work in terms of a poll is telling them we need to give people a little more. But in that approach, while they might be given a little more, they're not giving enough. And more importantly, they are not obligated, or they don't feel a right and a need to lift people out of poverty. The problem with the PPP is that in their thinking, the more people in poverty is the more they can dominate, control, and manipulate. And so what now would have caused the change? Just the mere fact that they know they are going to lose government, and that people are saying that they are not benefiting from the resources. The fact that they went into the local government election and bribed left, right, and center and lost in many areas signaled to them that even bribery wouldn't work. So they're in a real dilemma. Additionally, because they do not have a clear policy framework. When you don't have a clear policy framework, you can be easily led by populism. And I think in some regard, that is where they're heading. Listen to him on oil and gas. You can see now shifting and becoming kind of anti-ExxonMobil. So the dynamics of the political economy of Guyana would have forced them to change. And on the question of inflation, if they were serious, and they were saying before it is inflationary, and now they are going to do it, then one would have expected that if they were driven by data and they were part of a proper plan, at the same time they would have done what we did in our budget presentation, to identify measures to deal with inflation. So it is one or two things. Either they just were lying and didn't believe that it is going to push inflation, or two, they are so incompetent that now that they accept it, they refuse to block a loophole that they themselves pointed out. It's a manifestation of the incompetence. And you've seen it. Imagine Irfan went to a university, he alleges, but goes and tell this nation that from January semester, there will be free tuition. There was never a January. Any student who's been to the university, outside of the University of Iflot, will know that the semester starts in February. What January semester is this chap talking about? All he's doing is destroying his credibility. A first-year university student Anybody who went to a university with a semester system will know there is no January semester.
One of the things we also did want to point out is because the PUP is so piecemeal in its announcements and not dealing with issues properly, is that as this $60 billion finds its way into the economy, if they do not manage the foreign currency demands of the country well, you're going to see another foreign currency shortage, and that could lead to inflation. So really, it is incumbent upon the government to manage the supply of foreign currency as this money makes its way into the economy. We also want to strongly caution the government to make sure that the delivery of this money is done in a structured and well thought out way. It would be pretty absurd to see policemen walk around behind people with backpacks full of $200,000 in the backpack. I mean, that would be, first of all, a serious security risk. But second of all, I mean, are we really going to have what happened with the COVID-19 cash grant, where it took forever for people to get access to money and many people were missed? Even right now, social media is replete with people saying they're going to stay home all day until they get this cash grant money. They don't want people to miss them. They still have pink slips from last time. We need to see an improvement in the way that these monies are delivered, a structured way that these monies are delivered, and people should not be left out. That is not only bad policy design, it leaves scope for people to steal what rightfully belongs to citizens of Guyana. And of course, many citizens are concerned that the same pink slip money that they were supposed to get, the money that they didn't receive at the first go-round or when the COVID-19 cash grant was being delivered, that money ended up being stolen. So we need to see an improvement over what has happened in the past, and we're extremely concerned about that.
Thank you. Ms. Triana Williams.
Hi, good morning, Trina Williams, Ghana Chronicle. Mr. Martin, coming back to your press statement, while in office, the APNU AFC government had emphasized the need for feasibility studies to assess the most effective use of oil money, including whether cash transfers are viable. But now your party is saying that there should be more windfall of oil revenues. Would you agree that this inconsistent approach by the party reflects a lack of a coherent and solid stance when it comes to the party's economic plans?
I don't understand what you mean by some more windfall. The question to me needs restructuring so that I can understand it.
You said that there should be more from the oil revenues. It must be fairly distributed. That's what you said in your press statement. I am asking if, since while the APNU AFC was in office, when they were asked about cash grants with the use of oil money, it said that it needed to be feasibility studies.
Never said that.
However, now your party is advocating
May I
for
say to
more
you,
from the oil revenue.
may I say to you that
This inconsistent approach, would you agree that it lacks a coherent and solid stance when it comes to economic plans? That's my question.
your question is a non-question, and let me tell you why. Which budget the APNU had with oil resources to be able to talk about distribution of it? There was none.
I'm mentioning feasibility studies, I'm not mentioning the budget.
No, unless you don't understand what you're asking. We have always said.
No, I understand what I'm asking.
We have always said.
President Granger has said that it needed to be feasibility studies to assess the most effective use of oil money, including whether cash transfers are viable. That is the premise of my question.
Well, if that is your question, now it makes a little sense. Let me say this. When David Granger was talking, we were looking at oil money coming. The WPA, if I recall, through Clive Thomas, had suggested that there be feasibility, that there be this cash transfer. At the time, none of us would have known the details. And as I understand it, David Granger was saying that we need to study and understand it and then decide whether we will deliver it or not. Now, nothing is wrong with that. Like we said in the oil and gas sector, one of the problems this government has is Jagdeo wakes up today and believes we should fly to the star, he takes off. Irfan Ali wakes up the next day and believes we should dock under the sea, he docks. There is no structured approach. There are no proper feasibility studies to say this is economically viable or not. When we did the gas to shore, we had feasibility studies done, we had environment impact assessment done, and the site that was going to be chosen was based on data. And so we have always shown an approach that necessitates those studies, those assessments. This government does not do any study. In fact, some of them lack the ability to study. What they are doing is waking up a morning, get an idea, and just announce it. You have to have feasibility studies. You have to have survey. Just listen to Jack Doe yesterday. You announce that you are going to give this money, but you yourself hasn't defined what is a household. On what basis then will you do it? If you listen to him, you will hear a man who is lost. And that is why sometimes I don't know how they give him the name economist. I guess he did some political economy. But he's no economist. Any economist that is worth his salt will know before you announce something about a household, you would have had to clarify in your mind, define in your mind. He was saying, oh, I want something of 4,000, and then we can go to GPL and GWI as an entity. You should know on what basis they calculate the figure that $200,000 a month or one off. On what basis did they calculate the figure they can give if they don't know what constitutes a household, how many households they have? So their very pronouncement suggests that there is need for proper studies before pronouncing. Jack Deere sung yesterday, excuse me, I don't like calling people idiots, but I don't have another word. As a man who involved in these pronouncements, but they are unprepared to implement it because the basic unit they will use for delivering it, they haven't defined a household. I would say to you, any government worth its salt will have to do feasibility studies before. And in any major project, there is need for environmental impact assessment. And Jack Doe's attempt to suggest that all we are talking about review is an indication of its limitations as it relates to governing a society properly. It is for that reason Skeldon is a white elephant, a mess. Because here is a man, they did no feasibility study. But he had decided that we can put this money here and it can generate so much of power and so much of gain. When people, I remember being involved in a discussion on television with Robert Passad, and I raised the question of if you will have the cane to do what you're doing. None. Why you think we lost billions on the fiber optic cable? Because they did no proper study. They understood nothing. All they knew, money was there and they could get part of it. So they went down the road of a fiber optic cable, which was supposed to give us cheap, quick internet. They never got past laying the cables. The PPP's own history should tell them that we need to cut this nonsense out and have a proper approach. You build a packaging factory. You didn't consider location. When I was doing economics at O level, one of the first things the book they tell you is location. You don't consider location. You don't even consider the wider economy and what needs to be packaged. But you build a packaging factory, it failed, and now you come to tell people you're turning it into a training center for the oil and gas sector. It is obvious stupidity. Guyanese need to open their eyes and see that the PPP has no plan for Guyana. This government has no plan for Guyana. They are a rapacious set of people enjoying the wealth of this country while the people of Guyana punish.
Allow me also to jump in here. And Miss Trina Williams, your question. 3 months ago, just 3 months ago, you wrote a story in the Chronicle where the headline is VP Jagdeo defends sustainable use of oil revenue over direct cash transfers. And Jagdeo has always been opposing cash transfers since he was in opposition. So perhaps that question is best suited for that Thursday talk show that he would normally have. I didn't hear it yesterday. Perhaps you were absent. Maybe next week you can throw it into him to see what is his response as to why cash transfer now as opposed to the positions he had previously. Thank you.
One of the things we also really want to highlight is that our policies are policies that we spent a lot of time discussing, researching, and studying. In fact, I engaged Clive Thomas on this issue when he first mentioned cash transfers, and the question was whether there should be conditional cash transfers. So as an example, a salary top-up is a conditional cash transfer, you have to be working. A student stipend is a conditional cash transfer, you have to be studying. I engaged the leader many years ago on the issue of cash transfers as it related to ensuring that children attended classes. So we have done comprehensive and in-depth analysis of these various policies. That's why our pronouncements are nuanced. We don't just say give out money and we're not specific in the mechanisms, and we're not specific in what is going to be the conditionalities connected to them. That is something that we've discussed at length. What we've also done is we've relied on best practice from countries that have had success with this. We often mention Bolsa Familia in Brazil, which has been shown to improve pass rates. It's been shown to reduce childhood malnutrition. We've looked at the earned income tax credits in the United States, which has been shown to increase incomes, has been shown to decrease poverty, has been shown to, again, reduce childhood malnutrition. So it is based off of this type of research, economic research, that we put out these pronouncements. We don't just say off the top of our heads, do X, Y, and Z. I want to point out one really concerning thing about the way the government has structured its policies, which indicates that they did not do a proper study. One of the things that's indicated is that there's going to be a child tax credit of $10,000 per child. But that is an extremely concerning policy because many people in Ghana, especially low-income people, do not pay taxes in the first place. And so it seems to me that a huge chunk of Guyana's young people will be completely bypassed by that policy because the policymakers didn't take the time to sit down and analyze how exactly this would impact the country. Instead, we believe that there should be $10,000 given out directly to families because many families, such as your market vendors, such as your taxi drivers and so on, are not really in the formal economy and are not in the GRA system in that way. We don't design policies to bypass the very people that are intended to benefit from the policy. Do you think it really was the PPP intending that poor children of every ethnicity would not benefit from their child tax transfer? Rather, it is that they didn't take the time to sit down and evaluate the policy. That is the kind of nonsense you're looking at. So we are more careful in our policy design, and as a result, you see good policies produced. That is what is going on in the PPP, unless they're going to come to the Ghanaian people and say they don't want poor children to benefit from that tax, from that child care benefit.
I need to bring something to people's attention. What we do is we hold sector policy discussions. We had one on oil and gas. And after lengthy discussions, our policy document emerged. You know what Jagdeo did? At the Marietta Summit, he was allegedly laughing that they got to discuss it. I mean, how childish. If you are serious about running a country, you have to have discussions on every sector, and you have to engage professionals so that professional knowledge comes to bear on your policy position. And even as you adumbrate policies, you have to continuously evaluate them and to make changes based on the changing situation. So for them to be going on as if feasibility study is a crime, is really concerning because feasibility studies are necessary if you're going to run a country properly. And I already give you the example of Skeldon, the fiber optic cable, and we could run the whole list, Amelia Falls. We can run the whole list of projects that they became involved in, and you cannot get something as simple as building a building for where GDC was a problem for this government. And now when they rehabilitate it, they're telling you it costs $2 billion to rehabilitate. Those are things that give you a clear indication of where this government focuses. Corruption.
Mr.
Okay, I have a follow-up to that question. Sorry, to the statement. I know that it was just mentioned that the party is careful in its policy design. However, would you say that eliminating programs such
The
as
what?
Because We Care grant while the party was in office, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, would you say that eliminating programs such as the Because We Care cash grant and instead increasing the salaries of government officials is a reflection of implementing policies for the people? And in response to Mr. Michael, you should read the story within the context and not just read the headline just like that. That'll be all.
Well, maybe you should carry the right headline. Well, let me talk about this Because We Care cash grant story. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Perhaps you can do some research. And you would see that it was, I think, in the 2015 budget debates, it was Raphael Trotman who held up a paper, a cabinet paper, that showed that it was a discussion done with the then Dr. Roger Luncheon and members of the People's Progressive Party that said that at that time, the Because We Care cash grant was not sustainable. And it was them who had made that decision, and upon them demitting office, that paper was there in the office of the president, and it was presented in the National Assembly, and it was Raphael Trotman that made that in his presentation. I think you can find it online to understand it. And the Because We Care cash grant of $10,000 that was there with them, we had implemented a series of measures to deal with children and their education at our various school levels. And further to that, the People's Progressive Party, and this is a point that people ought to understand, no part of the coalition years, 2015 to 2020, did we have the opportunity to expend oil resources. No part of it. Our highest budget was $300 billion, I think, in 20, and perhaps Elson can guide me there, $300 billion in 2019, which was passed in 2018 of November. Oil resource was not at our disposal. We have oil resource now, so you're expected to have a higher budget. But what the people of Guyana want is for them to benefit more from it. And they want to see more prudent financial management. That is what they want to see. Thank you.
Mr. Mark Bench.
Thank you so much. I'm late, so I'm not sure if this question was answered. Sorry about that. But before I begin, let me just say to Mr. Mahipal that I took umbrage with him describing that Thursday talk shop as a talk show. Please don't do that, Mr. Mahipal. Having said that, my questions are directed to the leader of the opposition. I believe I've structured them properly. One, as it pertains to the PDP's introduction or reintroduction of free tuition at the university level, how disingenuous is the PPP in not stating that they're the ones for almost 3 decades who took away free education at the university level from the Guyanese public? The other thing is, they have now claimed that they are injecting $10 billion into NIS. Do you find it as hypocritical, seeing that it was the PPP that left NIS almost bankrupt when when Jack Deere took out hundreds of millions of dollars to give to his friends and cronies for the Morris River Bridge? And the other question, as it pertains to these new deals, and suddenly everything will be by the end of 2025. Do you see this, all of these things, 50% electricity cut and all these things, as merely elections gimmicks and propaganda?
Well, I can start with the first. I did say in the press statement that it's election gimmicks. Look, I believe there is need for oil resources to be injected into NIS. I agree that they have destroyed NIS, but we have some proposals for the injection of resources in NIS that are different and will impact. But you would recognize that some of our things we have to hold back, because virtually everything we say, the PPP runs to implement it and then seek to take credit for it. So I want to make that. Now, in the press statement, I don't know if you were here at the inception, I did point out that it was the PPP that took away free education at the university. I pointed out also that when Burnham brought free education at the university level, we did not have oil money. So the argument cannot be a shortage of resources. It is just the PPP's way of ensuring that they stifle poor people. And for them, look what they do with law. Poor people children can't become lawyers because they removed the scholarship for law. And their wealthy family, friends and favorite, they're all going to do law. So on the one hand, you're arguing that there's no need for lawyers in the society. There are too many. But on the other hand, your family, your friends, and your favorites, they're going and do law, and you're increasing the amount of lawyers. So the PPP is disingenuous generally. This thing about free education, they should shut them out. They have criticized it all the time. And it is only the constant pressure from us to ensure that the university is free. And then I'll show you how they operate. They said the university is free. I would expect if the president really was addressing the university, because you are removing an income from the university by the way of tuition fees, which we agree should be moved. But isn't it sensible, if you're a proper policy maker, to outline what you will do to fill the gap and what you will do to improve the quality of education at the University of Guyana? Because if you just do what you did and then they refuse to give the resources based on whether they like the vice chancellor or not, the university will be in trouble. And it is not above the PPP to use budgetary allocations to force out a vice chancellor to get one that they want. So we always have got to be careful with the PPP, because they do not do things based on a moral commitment to the citizens of Guyana. They always do it for political purposes. And all they would have done yesterday is really try to respond to the opposition's demands and at the same time try to claw back the support they are losing. And you know they had planned to have elections October this year. I was told October. But as they saw what was happening and their lack of popularity, they are pushing it back. We will continue to outline clear policy positions, and we know that the people of Guyana are following us. There was just a program in which they deal with the rent-to-own scheme, and young people on all sides would have come out in support of the program. Those are programs that are well thought out and will impact positively on the people of Guyana.
Mark, let me add my voice there and compliment what the leader said. But let me first apologize for the word talk show. Perhaps I should have said a gaff show. But I have to add my voice to this university issue here. I hear when the president announced and said tuition fee would be removed. I know when the PNC had free education at the university, it was all fees, all cost. Nobody paid a dime, and the leader can attest to that. Now, UG has tuition fee, and there is also facilities fees and miscellaneous fees. So the fees at UG that a student pays is divided between tuition and miscellaneous or facilities fee. So the question has to be, is it, when you say tuition, a question to the government, that is, when you say tuition will be removed, the tuition fees will be removed, is it the entire costing that a student would have to pay, or just the tuition fee, which is, I think, about 220,000 or thereabout for the courses, for the programs? And the facilities fees, I think, is about 100 and something thousand also. So we need to have that clarity. Our position in the PNCR, the APNU, is that every fee, everything should be free at the University of Guyana. And we will be able to know better when Budget 2025 comes out to see what is the sum that will be allocated to the University of Guyana, to know if they are going to ensure that the University of Guyana is properly funded to provide that quality of education to our students. I just wanted to add that.
We also need to know. We also need to know if they're going to expand the resources to be able to employ people from in the diaspora, so that you can also, in addition to what you have improved delivery of education to the student population.
Yeah, if I may, just a final question, please, moderator.
Go ahead.
Thank you. As it pertains to Linden and the flooding, dozens of residents have had their places damaged. There was no talk about compensation for those people. What is your take on the neglect of the people of Linden? And also, it's approaching almost 3 years now, and Bamia School is yet to be completed. And just a couple of days ago, the minister, quote unquote, Minister of Foreign Affairs, rushed into Linden to meet with Venezuelan migrants. Are you concerned about this sort of secret meeting and maybe special accommodation of lands and house lots to those migrants? Thank you.
Let us start with Linden and flooding. This is not the first time Linden flooded. The last time, they carried some cleaning agents and I think some food stuff. When there's flooding in PPP strongholds, they give them cash grants. So it is clearly discriminatory. So Linden has been identified by the People's Progressive Party for destruction until they can control it. And since they can never control it, once the PPP in government, they will seek to destroy Linden, which is what they do. Todd going doesn't worry me. The PPP has no respect for Todd. If you hear they themselves talk about Todd. So when they send Todd, you know right away is a gimmick. However, there must be concerns about Venezuelan presence. While we should treat them in keeping with international conventions, we must be concerned because the PPP is not known for dealing with those issues in a humanitarian way. It is always an attempt to see how they can use them for political purpose, especially voting. And the fact that it is be beaten bad in Linden, one cannot rule out that one of the strategy can be to put Venezuelans in Linden and then seek to give them birth certificates and all the things that they do to ensure they increase the numbers because they're after Linden. On the Bamia School, you know, I want to make a point with the Bamia School. If the contractors were different, because what in essence I understand happened is that they provided inadequate resources, first of all, in the contract. And having provided inadequate resources and all the problems that emerged, the contractors found it difficult to implement the project. Normally, if it was a PPP favorite, is Vorment they style it? All right, I don't remember the exact name, but what they would have done is re-engage the contractor, environment, re-engage the contractors, and sought to provide the resources to ensure that the school is completed. But in their mind, they're getting a double whammy. They're embarrassing the contractors, is one, and two, they're affecting the children of Linden. And so I would say at this stage, the government needs to ensure that that contractor get the resources to complete that school.
Thank you. I will take my final question from Mr. Adam Harris.
Lucky Adam.
Lucky Adam, yes. The allocation of the cash grant and all these things being announced by the government, one contained in the budget for this year. In order to make such payments, and some of the cash grants payments made, was the government expected to go to the National Assembly to seek to have these funds duly allocated? If not, is the opposition going to voice any objection to extra budgetary payments, extra budgetary allocations?
Well, there should not be extra budgetary allocation. They should come to the parliament for additional resources if they don't have the resources in the budget.
Supplementary.
At the supplementary funding. When they come, we will critique what they're doing, but we are not opposed to the Guyanese people benefiting. Of course, we are aware because of the corrupt nature of the government. If they come for 60 billion, a good 30 to 40% going to end up in the hands of the PPP and the acolytes. But we will do nothing to prevent the people of Guyana from getting the resources they need. In fact, we are committed to providing them more in a very transparent and accountable way.
Thank you very much.
But in that case, in that case, wouldn't you be condoning an illegality? You know, I mean, yes, you don't want people to be, you don't want to prevent people from accessing the money. But at the same time, if this is extra budgetary allocation, there is need to go to Parliament.
Yeah, no, that's
So
the law.
wouldn't you-
That's the law, Adam.
No, the law provides for that, for them to come to parliament,
for supplementary.
supplementary, and we approve it. So it wouldn't be.
So if they don't have that they have already budgeted for as their cost of living measure, if they don't have sufficient based on the announcements that were made, they will have to come to Parliament for supplementary.
Adam, you'll note that they
Yeah.
have put aside $7 billion for cost of living adjustments this year. So that means that the difference, at minimum, they would have to come to Parliament in order to get that ratified. But one of the things we want to highlight on the note of transparency is that a lot of our policies are designed to cut out corruption, the corruption that many are concerned about, and to promote transparency. I want to close on this note, the tax threshold that we're talking about, where it's $400,000, where Guyanese who are earning $400,000 and less will not be paying taxes. That is something which can be very transparently dealt with. And so that is one of the things we've got in mind. We expect that to, first of all, provide great benefit to Guyanese, but to also generate jobs by putting money into the economy, to also encourage people to work more. So we're going to increase our labor force participation rates, and to ensure that businesses in Guyana are able to expand due to increasing demand, which will grow the GDP as well. So that's just another thing we want to highlight.
There's another point I want to make. The fact that the government had only put 7 billion for that suggests that they had no intention
of doing it
and
in
that
the
it is
first
the
place.
pressure from the opposition that caused them to come with these measures. And the fact that they're now accepting that the cost of living is very high. And even as they accept that, the measures they are bringing are not targeting the reduction of cost of living. I have given them measures that can target a reduction of cost of living, but they don't want to go in that way. How are you going to reduce the cost of living when a lot of the products that are prices are increased are local products? And unless you increase agriculture, which we call for a sustainable agricultural program in every region, if you do that, you will have more goods in the market, and therefore the prices will be less. But Ashley Singh did say to me in the presence of Shyama Solomon and company years ago that they have to leave regions 2, 3 parts of 4, 5, and 6 with the comparative advantage. So they rather give their support base money at the expense of the other regions, which will suffer for high cost of living because there isn't the promotion of agriculture in all those regions.
Thank you very much. I want to thank our media personnel for joining today's person. Of course, to all our viewing audience, do have a wonderful afternoon.
Recording stopped.